Hi guys, welcome to July and this month's dispatches. As you can see right here, we get two very good looking models of an iconic Vietnam war machine. Of course, most of you will recognize this as the UH-1 made by B.A.R. They're originally called the IRIQUOIS, but in actual fact everyone knew it as the HUEY. We've been wanting to make this model for a long time, and in fact over the years we have made a number of the hand-carved, hand-painted wooden versions of the HUEY, but finally we found the right factory that could do a really quality item like this in mixed media. So this is a mixture of polystone, resin, and die-cast metal. So it's strong and sturdy, but it doesn't lose any detail. Lots of great detail. And as you can see before you, we've got two versions, a US Army one and a US Marine Corps one. Now again, when you think of the Vietnam War, this really is one of the iconic sights and sounds of the Vietnam War. Any decent war movie, maybe with one exception, that's Full Metal Jacket. They used different helicopters in that one, but in nearly every other one, including of course Apocalypse Now, this is the hero helicopter that you will see. So let's talk a little bit in detail about this helicopter. During the Vietnam War, and again, Hueys first appeared in Vietnam in 1962, and that was the A and B model, UH-1A and 1B, which were considerably smaller than the D model, which is what we've produced here. During the war, or America's involvement in the war, from say 1962 until 1975, more than 7,000 Hueys actually flew in Vietnam, of which over 3,300 were lost in action. It was a very dangerous job, or series of jobs that the Hueys performed. Everything from medical evacuation to troop carrying to shifting arms and ammunition from point A to point B and delivering troops into battle, or even just moving them from one location to another one. Hueys were everywhere during that time. Now let's talk about the very first one you see here on this little platform. Now, by the way, the platform that you see here is not in production at this moment. This is just a little dummy one that I made to see if this could work, and I'll come back to you later about that. But here you see what they call the dust-off. Those were the medevac helicopters that were used by the US Army to evacuate wounded from the battlefield. The guys that flew these aircraft did an absolutely amazing job, because the helicopters themselves were unarmed, and they would be flying into hot landing zones, or LZs as they called them, where even though they had large prominent red crosses, it didn't make any difference to the Viet Cong or later the NVA. Excuse me. But normally when dust-off helicopters like this went into action, they would be accompanied by some gunships that would provide covering fire and suppressing fire on the area that the dust-off would have to go down in. And they reckoned that if someone was wounded in Vietnam, normally it would take 3 minutes from the time a call came in that there were wounded in a specific area that had to be picked up to the time these guys got into the air was about 3 minutes. And then by the time they had picked up the wounded to bring them back from the battlefield to a field hospital was usually no more than 15 minutes, which says a lot for the organisation and capability of the US forces in Vietnam and the medics that were serving the troops. So here we have the model here, and again there's plenty of room inside the main cabin for you to put in wounded figures. If you look closely, there are two pilot figures in each aircraft, pilot and co-pilot. What I've done here, just to show scale, is to put some of our earlier released, a crew chief standing here along with a pair of pilots in the background, and those are still available should you want to buy them. The aircraft in front here is a US Marine Corps troop carrier, and again we've left the cabin in the rear open so that you can place troops inside should you wish. Again, comes with pilot, co-pilot, and you'll see just walking up here is a door gunner. Most Hueys like this would carry two door gunners, one on each side, usually armed with an M60 machine gun. So we've done them in this configuration. We already have seated figures with M60 machine guns that are existing in our Vietnam series that if you want you can place into the helicopters. But both very nice looking machines, lots of great detail. We've only produced 200 of each model of these first two Hueys that we're doing. Now obviously we'll see how it goes. I hope these are successful. We've brought them in, I think, a very competitive price for a high quality model such as this, and as I say, we're only producing 200 of each. It'll come in a beautiful box that you'll see later, and also each box will have a certificate numbered 1 to 200 for each of those aircraft. So if you're looking for a centerpiece of your Vietnam collection, you won't go far wrong if you pick one or maybe even two of these Hueys to put into your collection. So we'll give you a closer look at these, but in the meantime, enjoy. I'll catch up with you later. Thanks. Hi there. This particular video of dispatches has actually been filmed in several different parts, only because we had several different setups to show off the figures, and we come to one particular setup that I thought I'd give you a little bit of the background story to it. As some of you may know, July is a month every year when I try to get down to Australia, and I've been going to Australia on a regular basis to visit our dealers and collectors down there since way back in 2008, and this was an annual visit that I would make, and until the whole COVID pandemic thing happened, that was the first break where we stopped going for about 4 years. Anyway, we started back again last year, and one of the many reasons that I enjoy going to Australia at this time is that we always get lots of ideas and suggestions from dealers and collectors. And in this particular case, when I was down last year, I was talking to our friend Brett Williams of Toy Army Workshop in Brisbane, and also to Sven de Breckele, Peter Nathan Toy Soldiers in Sydney. And among the many ideas that we talked about, there was one that both guys mentioned that got me thinking again, because it came up a couple of years previously, but for whatever reason I wasn't really that interested. This time, however, it just seemed to strike a note, and the fact that Both dealers had mentioned it without, I don't think they were talking to each other as far as coming up with ideas, but it was almost like too much of a coincidence. And the idea, of course, was, how about doing another modern series based on Black Hawk Down, which was the Battle of Mogadishu in 1993, which of course the story's been told by a terrific book by Mark Bowden, and also a great movie by Ridley Scott. It's also been told in quite a lot of detail by Lee Neville, who works with Sven in the Sydney shop. So putting all these things together, I started to get really excited, and the more I researched it, the more I realised that this would make a great modern war series. So I came back to Hong Kong from Australia and almost immediately started researching more, reading more, and then sketching up a whole range of figures. And the more I sketched up the figures, the more I really enjoyed the action side of this series. So it's taken us that long because just the whole process of sculpting and master painting, then manufacturing, and then seeing how it would develop. So what you've got now, this month we are launching this brand new series on Black Hawk Down with the first 6 US Army Rangers. And this, let me, if I may, I'm going to read from what I've written here, because this explains much more of what we're trying to do. So if you'll bear with me, let me take it from here. We're introducing the advanced party of a dramatic new series that tells in 1/30 scale military miniature detail the story of one of the US Army's bloodiest days in modern times. Let's go back to where it all began. Somalia in East Africa during the early 1990s was a basket case of a country. Years of vicious tribal warfare between rival clans had caused a famine on a truly biblical scale. Already more than 300,000 civilians, many of them women and children, had died of starvation. One particular clan leader, Mohammed Farah Adid, the most powerful of the Somali warlords, ruled the country from its capital, Mogadishu. From there he had been seizing most of the international food shipments arriving by sea and air from a shocked and sympathetic world. America and the United Nations had then dispatched troops to the war-torn country to stop the stealing and help distribute the food to those who needed it most. And for a time that worked, until most of these forces, including the Americans, departed. Almost immediately the plunder of the food aid began again, and the situation went from bad to worse. In August 1993, as conditions worsened, the United States once more dispatched a small force of some of America's best fighting units to Mogadishu. These included units from the Delta Forces team, the 160th SOAR, which stands for Special Operations Aviation Regiment, flying a mix of helicopters including the powerful UH-60 Blackhawks, and men from the 75th Ranger Regiment. All of these troops had been given a clear, simple mission: remove Adid from power and restore order. Over the course of the following weeks and then several months, that mission statement was to lead to one particular day when everything that could go wrong did go wrong in a military operation. Now this has been documented in great detail, as I told you before, first in the best-selling book by Mark Bowden, and then in the blockbuster movie by Ridley Scott. This is your first look at the advanced party of King and Country's Black Hawk Down. Now, what you will see here in front of you is the first 6 individual figures that we're releasing with this series. You'll also see in the background here, this is one of the master castings of one of 2 Humvees that we're releasing. They will come a wee bit later, perhaps even next month, I hope. But at the moment, that's just what you can see. What you can see here is another dummy Humvee, not made by King Country, but virtually the same scale as the one you see here, obviously not as detailed, but we painted this up to give you an idea what the Humvees will look like and the colour scheme that you've got. But as you can see here at the moment, this is the first 6 individual action figures, and again I think they're really terrific action figures, lots of dynamism and a real gritty realism. It was quite a job getting the camouflage right, because there's actually 2 camouflage patterns. There's this early camouflage pattern from the 1990s, and the sort of what they call the chocolate chip pattern on the helmets. You'll see they've got a fair assortment of different weapons. This first guy here has got the M16A2 with the M203 grenade launcher that's attached underneath. All of the other guys have got the standard M16A2, which was a development obviously of this M16A1, but of course these weapons had many improvements, including, importantly, a heavier gun barrel and also a 30 round curved magazine that would contain the 5.56 NATO standard round. Now, just a point of interest, here in this little section here are some of the follow-up Rangers that we've done. So these are the ones that are going to be coming out in the following months, but in July you've got these 6 figures, including this very good NCO figure, pointing and shouting. And again, this guy will be coming, I'm not sure, I'd like to think it's August, it might be September, but if we can get them out in August. And you'll see that the gunner here is cocking the 50 caliber machine gun. So lots to look forward to. A little bit extra background, the little diorama you saw here, you can see here, was produced by yours truly. And what I did was I actually went on the internet and looked at real photographs of Mogadishu at this time, 1990s, or certainly pre-2000, and that gave me the inspiration to build a little diorama to put the figures on, and I think it really helps the scene come alive. I hope you think the same. I mean, this is a great series. We've already got Special Forces, Delta Force guys in the pipeline, and even the guys who rescued or attempted to rescue the crew from one of the downed Black Hawk helicopters. We're doing a little series with the 2 Medal of Honor guys and the survivor of that Black Hawk down crash, a pilot called Mike Durant. So look out for that as well. And hopefully I'll be, when I'm down in Australia, I'll be showing some of the illustrations that led to these figures. So without further ado, I'll let you see some close-ups of the little diorama, and then after that we'll go on to the few remaining figures that you've not heard or seen anything about. See you then. Thanks. Hi guys, welcome back. Now we're going to move away from the war in Vietnam and the events in Mogadishu in 1993 to something completely different. We're moving away from all of that to the old Wild West, or at least the cattle drive of that period between 1865 and the mid 1880s, when there was a huge cattle boom in America. And as you know from the other figures we've done in this series, we've been concentrating on those great trail drives all the way from Texas up to the northern railheads in Kansas and beyond. An important part of any cattle drive, very important to it, was the fact that you had to feed all of these cowboys and make sure that they were well fed and happy on the way up, because these trail drives would take anywhere from 2 or 3 months, even up to 5 months, depending how big the herd was and what the weather was like. But an essential part of the trail drive was this little wagon that you see here, the chuck wagon. Now, I think some of you will know that we've been working on this project for quite a while. The inspiration for the chuck wagon itself came from when I was staying in San Antonio for 3 months back in 2022, and I had the opportunity on many occasions to visit the Briscoe Museum of Western Art right in the heart of San Antonio, and it focuses on all kinds of memorabilia, paintings and actual artifacts of the West and Texas's part in it. And in the center of the museum there's a wonderful exhibit of a chuck wagon, an original chuck wagon, and it's in a beautiful setting. And when I was at the museum, I took lots and lots of photographs, and I was determined that King & Country was going to produce its very own version. So finally, here it is here. Now, as you can see, you'll get close-ups later on, but it's a terrific piece. So the chuck wagon is in situ. Obviously they've camped for a few days, and the cook has set up his fire. We've got some of the cowboys that are coming off duty and expect to be fed, but at the same time the wagon itself has a detachable roof and detachable cowboys as well. No, but lots of accessories that go on the back of the wagon, on the little table or door that actually covered the chuck box and folded down to make a work table. Now, few facts about the chuck wagon itself. The man who invented the chuck wagon was a cattleman rancher called Charles Goodnight, who in 1866 was beginning those great trail drives up north with a herd of cattle, and knew that he had to have some kind of wagon that would carry supplies and extra food for the men on the journey. So what he did was he went along, and this was after the Civil War, and as you might imagine there was a lot of US Army surplus. So he looked around and he found a supply wagon that had been built specifically for the US Army, and he checked it over and he saw that it had lots of excellent features, and thought, I could adapt this to my needs. So he bought this surplus wagon, and then got a local carpenter to follow his ideas and designs to create what you see before you. And these were a common sight, obviously, on the great trail drives for those boom years between 1865-66 all the way up to actually almost the late 1880s. And even if you go to Texas today, you'll see in rodeos and other events, you'll see replica chuck wagons. There might even be some genuine old ones, but some folks are still building them today to the same old design. So this is what we've got here. The wagon, lots of extras, including water barrel, lanterns, pots and pans, plates, all kinds of things. And you can see it right at the back here, what they call the chuck box. And the chuck box itself, it comprised all kinds of little drawers and nooks and crannies where the cookie, this guy here who was in charge of the chuck wagon, would keep all kinds of things that cowboys might need, including not so much arms and ammunition, certainly for the pistols and revolvers, but at the same time some basic medicinal medicines that could be used if someone was hurt or had some kind of ailment that could be treated, and even things like tobacco, salt and sugar, and all the little bits and bobs that you would need on a journey like this. It's a terrific little model. It comes in a very special box, which we'll show you later, but I thought I'd just set up this little scene here to give you an idea of how well it looks with some of the figures. So look out for it. It should be available mid-July, and as I say, Later on in this video, you'll get a nice 360-degree look at the wagon itself. So I'll finish off for the moment, and then we'll come back with something else. Thanks. Victor Charlie's Viet Cong. In actual fact, it's 2 Viet Cong figures and 1 North Vietnamese army. So what we've got is a standing VN 186, which is a commissar. That was the political officer in the Viet Cong, and he's got his orders, or I think he may have a map. In fact, he's got a map in front of him, but he's giving orders to the troops. Commissars were always a part of every unit of the Viet Cong and the NVA. The next figure is a North Vietnamese squad leader, and he's obviously celebrating something. He's got his AK-47 up above his head, and in his other hand he's holding a locally made copy of a Chinese fragmentation grenade, which itself was copied from the German style potato masher style grenade. But these grenades were not very reliable. In fact, quite a lot of them turned out to be duds. The final figure is another Viet Cong squad leader, and he's actually advancing with his AK-47 to the front. You'll see that the 2 Viet Cong guys are wearing a mix of regular army uniform and the black pants, very typical of Vietnamese peasants at that time. A little country maiden carrying a basket full of apples. Now, from the way she's dressed, she can be used in any kind of scene from the Middle Ages all the way up to the time of Napoleon. So a very flexible little figure, just adds a little bit of civilian flavour to a military scene. But have a closer look at this little figure. A lone US Marine with a Browning automatic rifle. When we did all of our Marines that have just landed and are still wearing the backpacks and full equipment and that are marching off to some destination, we suddenly realised that we'd forgotten to have a B.A.R. man, which was vitally important. And in this case, we finally get around to doing him, and this guy is walking along or marching along with his Browning automatic rifle. This weapon actually was invented during World War I, was used briefly towards the end of World War I by American soldiers and Marines, and then was used throughout the period up until the Second World War, into Korea, and even up until the mid-1950s when it was superseded by the M60 machine gun. Anyway, a nice little figure to add on to your walking US Marines. Now, here's something not that unusual, but I think very useful. One of the problems that my late brother Gordon and myself had when we were building dioramas is we never had enough sandbags. And in the early days, we actually used Tamiya plastic sandbags done by the Japanese model company. The problem was they were 1/35 scale and not really suitable for our 1/30 scale figures and fighting vehicles. So as Gordon was building most of the dioramas, he would use something called blue tack, which is a kind of grey-blue plasticine material that he'd cut into little lengths and then shape, coat them in super glue to harden them, and then paint them. And these were actually great because they could be used in all kinds of different situations, and they were a little bit malleable as well. The only problem was they took an awful long time to make, and we decided there had to be some better solution. Well, eventually I came up with that solution, which is, why don't we make a whole range of polystone sandbags. Now, we've used polystone before, as many of you know, which is a mix of marble dust and resin. We've used it for vehicles, we used it for buildings, we used it for defence works, and we've actually made in the castings sandbags, but they're all joined up together. We thought, let's do individual ones. So what we've come up with is 2 different colours and a little bag of 24 individual sandbags that you can use in any kind of 20th century warfare or even into the 21st century. So perfect for World War I displays, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, the war in the Middle East. So thanks for everything. And just before I go, I'd just like to say that I'll also be visiting Australia and seeing lots of our Aussie friends. So once again, many thanks for looking in, and I'll see you next month. Cheers.